My mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "We just can't afford to take two, Grace. It wouldn't be fair to cancel when everything's already booked. Destiny is going on the trip. You'll understand. You always do." That was the moment something inside me finally cracked. 27 years of being the understanding one. The silent architect of their comfort, watching the person I financed walk away with the reward. I didn't reach for a tissue or seek a reason. My eyes remained dry because my empathy had reached a zero balance limit they'd been overdrawing for years. Have you ever been the invisible a child in your own family, expected to be sensible, while everyone else gets the reward? Let me know your story down in the comments. I didn't let the silence drag. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a single tear or a shaky breath. Instead, I turned around and walked into my office. The air in the hallway was thick with the scent of expensive lilies my mother, Stephanie, had bought for the pre-cruise brunch, lilies that I had likely paid for without even knowing it. My internal temperature dropped. This wasn't a tantrum, it was an architectural audit of a foundation that had rotted through. At precisely 11:51 p.m., I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt like a precise laser, the kind used for measuring floor plans and quiet retribution. I didn't ask why, because the digital registry already told me the answer. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, and tonight, they had just initiated a hostile takeover. I logged into the digital asset registry I had set up to manage the estate's acquisitions. I scrolled past the lists of antique mahogany tables and Italian leather sofas until I reached the linked accounts. My heart didn't race, it slowed down. There it was. A transfer from my personal emergency savings account, $12,500. The memo line simply read, VVIP upgrade. They hadn't just excluded me from the $1,250,000 world cruise. They had stolen my security to ensure Destiny had a better view of the ocean. My father, Gary, and my mother, Stephanie, had turned my bank account into their private petty cash fund. I rubbed my eyes, feeling nothing but a sharp, cold clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a structural reassessment. By 12:03 a.m., the extraction was already in motion. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second-guess the contract I was about to dissolve. I opened a new tab and contacted the premium moving service I used for my design clients. I knew the owner. He owed me a favor from a high-end project last spring. I need an extraction, I typed into the secure portal. Full inventory removal. Savannah Estate. The house will be empty of its primary residence starting Saturday at 2 p.m. I need the crew there by 2:15. I looked at the send button. In their minds, I was the sensible one. The one who stayed home to water the plants and collect the mail while they drank champagne in the middle of the Atlantic. They thought they were leaving me behind to guard their castle. They had no idea that by the time they touched land again, the castle wouldn't just be empty. It would be a hollow shell, stripped of every luxury I had provided. My boots clicked against the Carrara marble island, a massive slab I had personally sourced and paid for 3 years ago. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a professional, skilled and precise, but in this house, they were just the hands of a servant who knew how to balance a checkbook. I realized then that I wasn't just sitting at a table, I was sitting at the spares table. I was the utility player, kept on the roster only because I was the only person willing to play every position without a salary. The house was quiet, but my head was loud with the ghosts of past invoices. I walked into the grand dining room and ran my fingers over the mahogany surface. I remembered the day Gary had almost lost this place. He hadn't told Stephanie. He hadn't told Destiny. He came to me in his study, the air smelling of cheap bourbon and expensive regret, and showed me the foreclosure notice. He needed $18,000 for the property taxes, and he needed it by Friday. I didn't ask questions. I was 24, working double shifts at 2 different design firms, and I handed him the money. I thought I was buying family stability. Now I realized I was just a silent investor in a business that was going bankrupt on character. I walked through the rooms, mentally totaling the cost of their comfort. The Italian leather sofas in the living room, $22,000. The custom lighting fixtures that made the estate look like a museum, $15,000. The high-end appliances in the kitchen that Destiny used only to film her aesthetic morning routine videos, $30,000. In total, I had poured $450,000 into the physical infrastructure of this estate. I had furnished their lives while they furnished my neglect. This was the trap of my survival. For 27 years, I had been the survivor of a system designed to keep me in my place. It was a prison without bars, a psychological state where I was trained to believe my only value was my utility. If I wasn't providing, I didn't exist. So I provided until I was a shadow, a ghost haunting my own bank account. I had spent my life as a bridge for them to walk across, never realizing that bridges don't get to go to the destinations they help others reach. My parents didn't see a daughter, they saw an insurance policy. Destiny didn't see a sister, she saw a lifestyle sponsor. I looked at the framed photos on the hallway wall. There was Destiny at her cheer competition, my parents front and center, screaming with pride. I remembered that day. I had been at the library, studying for the professional certification that would eventually pay for the roof over their heads. They hadn't even realized I wasn't there until they got home and asked what was for dinner. Then there was the photo from the Savannah social gala. Destiny was in a $4,000 gown I had bought her as a graduation present. I wasn't in the photo because I was the one behind the camera, making sure the lighting was perfect so her followers would be impressed. Now, looking at those photos, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. I realized that my love for them had been a contract, one that they had breached so many times it was now null and void. They wanted a hollow shell of a daughter, and that was exactly what they were going to get. I walked back to my office and pulled out the digital asset registry. This wasn't a family history anymore. It was a liquidation plan. The morning of their departure arrived with the kind of performative chaos that only my family could manufacture. The foyer was a minefield of designer luggage and discarded garment bags. Destiny was fluttering around in an airport outfit that probably cost more than my first car, barking orders about which suitcases were too heavy for her to lift. Stephanie was busy double-checking the VVIP cabin confirmation on her phone, her face glowing with a smug satisfaction that she didn't even try to hide from me. "Grace, did you make sure the extra sunblock is in the blue bag?" Stephanie asked, not looking up from her screen. "It's there, Mother," I said. My voice was flat, but she didn't notice. To her, I was just a voice-activated assistant. Gary came down the stairs, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. He patted his pocket, checking for his passport, and then looked at me. "Now, remember, Grace. The pool guy is coming on Tuesday. Make sure he doesn't overcharge us. And the hedges need a trim by Friday. We want the place looking sharp for when we get back. We're thinking of hosting a welcome-back brunch." He gave me a list. A literal, physical list of chores. It was 3 pages long. It included everything from professional carpet cleaning to deep cleaning the attic. They were going on a $1,250,000 cruise, and they were leaving me behind with a broom and a set of instructions. This was the mechanism of cruel normalization, where my exploitation was so routine, they no longer saw it as a choice, but as my natural function. "Oh, and Grace," Destiny chimed in, tossing a discarded sun hat toward me. "Can you take that to the dry cleaners? I think I got a smudge on it. And keep an eye on my Instagram. If I get any weird comments, just delete them for me, okay? I want my feed to stay positive while I'm at sea." I caught the hat. I looked at the smudge. It was a tiny, insignificant mark, just like the mark I had occupied in their lives. "Sure, Destiny," I said. "I'll handle everything." They didn't hate me. They just didn't see me as a person. I was an appliance. You don't apologize to a refrigerator for leaving it plugged in while you go on vacation. You just expect it to keep the milk cold until you get back. They had spent years refining the art of making my invisibility feel like a compliment. "You're so strong, Grace. You're so reliable." It was a cage made of praise, and I had been living in it for nearly 3 decades. When the car service pulled into the driveway, the energy shifted into a fever pitch of excitement. They were laughing, talking over each other about the Mediterranean. Stephanie gave me a quick, distracted hug that lasted less than 2 seconds. She smelled of expensive perfume and a complete lack of guilt. "We'll bring you something nice from the gift shop, sweetie," she said, already turning toward the door. "Try to relax a little while we're gone. You work too hard." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. "I will," I said. "I'm going to do exactly what I need to do." Gary gave me a nod. Destiny didn't even say goodbye. She was too busy filming a "follow me to the airport" story on her phone. Then, with a final, cheerful slam of the door, they were gone. I stood in the foyer, the silence rushing back in like a flood. I watched the car pull away through the side window until the sound of the engine was completely swallowed by the Savannah heat. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing in the emptiness. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed Jennifer, my godmother. She was the only person who had ever looked at this family and seen the truth. "They're gone," I said. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for 27 years, I replied. "Tell the trucks to move in." The moving trucks arrived at 2:15 p.m. precisely, their heavy tires crunching on the gravel driveway of the estate. I stood on the front porch with Jennifer, who had arrived with a professional camera and a neutral expression. She wasn't just there for emotional support, she was there as an objective witness to the professional extraction of my life. I didn't feel like a daughter anymore, I felt like a property manager executing a court-ordered repossession. I handed the lead mover my digital asset registry. It was a meticulously detailed document, listing every item I had purchased over the last 27 years, complete with digital copies of the original invoices and proof of payment from my personal accounts. This wasn't a chaotic grab for revenge, it was a systematic audit of a failed partnership. I pointed to the grand living room, and the extraction began. I watched as they wrapped the Italian leather sofas in protective plastic. I felt no attachment to them, only a cold satisfaction that they were no longer providing comfort to people who hadn't earned it. Next went the custom lighting fixtures I had designed, then the high-end kitchen appliances that had cost me $30,000. Jennifer moved through the rooms, documenting the state of the house as it was stripped bare. Every time a mover asked, "Does this go too?" I didn't hesitate. If my name was on the receipt, it left the building. The emptiness spread from room to room like a deliberate, clinical storm. The kitchen, once a masterpiece of stainless steel and marble, was reduced to a few mismatched, scratched-up plates and a rusted toaster that Gary had bought in a thrift store 20 years ago. I purposely left the furniture my parents had chosen, the sagging bachelor recliner and the chipped side tables. I wanted the contrast to be undeniable. I wanted them to walk in and see exactly what they looked like without the luxury I had provided for them. By 5 o'clock, the house was a skeleton. The echo of the movers' footsteps was the only sound left in a place that had once been loud with the demands of ungrateful people. I stood in the center of the foyer and realized that the house finally matched the emotional state of our family: high ceilings, grand history, and absolutely nothing of substance inside. While the movers were finishing the final load, I went into Gary's study to clear out my remaining personal files from the desk. I reached for a folder at the back of the mahogany drawer, and a separate, smaller ledger fell out. I picked it up, expecting business receipts, but as I flipped through the pages, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't a business ledger, it was a secret record of Gary's desperate attempts to maintain the estate's image while the foundations were rotting. There, tucked between pages of mounting debt, was a copy of a listing agreement for the Savannah estate. Gary hadn't just used my savings for the cruise, he had attempted to list the entire property for sale behind my back while they were away. My eyes zeroed in on the bottom of the page. There was a co-signature for the maintenance lien waiver, my name, written in a hand that looked like mine, but was too stiff, too forced. He had forged my signature to bypass the legal holds I had placed on the property. In that moment, any lingering trace of the understanding one vanished. I wasn't just dealing with ungrateful parents who played favorites, I was dealing with criminals who were willing to steal my legacy and my identity to fund their delusions. This discovery was the kill shot. It removed the last chain of guilt. I realized they didn't just want my utility, they wanted to erase my autonomy entirely. I took a clear photo of the forgery and messaged it to my godmother, Jennifer, who was waiting in the car. I found the reason I'm never looking back, I told her when I walked outside. I locked the front door for the final time, knowing that I held the keys to their destruction if I chose to use them. I wasn't running away, I was extracting myself from a crime scene. The family returned from their million-dollar world cruise on Sunday evening, suntanned and loud. They expected to walk into a house that smelled of lilies. Instead, they walked into a tomb. Stephanie's scream was so loud that Jennifer heard it from 2 houses away and immediately texted me. They didn't even drop their bags before Gary was dialing my number, his voice a frantic explosion of rage on my voicemail. 10 minutes later, they were at the door of my new apartment, pounding with the rhythm of people who still thought they had power. I opened the door calmly and leaned against the frame. Stephanie pushed past me, her face contorted. "Where is it, Grace? Where is the furniture? You stole everything." Gary was right behind her, his fists clenched. "That is theft. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold and factual. I walked to my dining table and laid out the digital asset registry and the file of forged documents. "Tell the police your daughter took the items she has legal invoices for. And while you're at it, tell them about the signature you forged on the property listing." Gary's face went from red to a sickly, ashen gray. The bravado evaporated. This was the illusion of power in a hollow shell. They had built their entire identity on the leather, the marble, and the social status those things bought. Now that the objects were gone, there was no internal being left to hold them upright. Stephanie sank into one of my new chairs, her designer outfit looking absurd in the face of her total lack of character. They were irrelevant people in a stripped-down world. "You said you couldn't afford to take 2, I said, looking Destiny straight in the eye as she hovered by the door, stunned into silence. "Now, you can afford to lose everything." I handed them a copy of the eviction notice for the maintenance liens I had legally assumed when I paid the property taxes Gary couldn't cover. "You have 30 days to find a new place to film your routines, Destiny. Because this estate is no longer your playground." The silence in my new apartment after they left was the most expensive thing I had ever earned. I sat at my table, watching the sunset over the Savannah marshes, and realized I finally knew what I was worth. For 27 years, I had lived in the shadow of their expectations, providing the light so they could see themselves. I had been the invisible child, but in the end, it was my invisibility that gave me the power to dismantle their world without them ever seeing it coming. I opened my phone and looked at the family group chat. It was a graveyard of demands, guilt trips, and ignored achievements. I selected every member, one by one, and hit block. Then, I opened my old professional spreadsheet where I tracked every dollar I'd spent on them for years. I stared at the numbers for a long moment, the cost of my compliance, and then I hit delete. That night, for the first time in my life, I slept through until morning. No noise, no guilt, no wondering what chore awaited me at dawn. I had learned that the best revenge isn't the empty rooms you leave behind, it's the full life you build for yourself once you realize you were never the extra in your own story, you were the only one writing it. Reclaiming your life often means taking back what others took for granted. If you were Grace, would you have left them with the empty house, or would you have walked away quietly? Share this story with someone who needs to know they are worth more than their utility.